Thank you very much. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit tonight about a challenge that a lot of organizations have increasingly these days, which is trying to figure out where to draw the line between hate speech and free speech. And specifically, I want to ask the question, should the law protect your right to say whatever the hell you want to say about anyone you want to say it about? And I'm curious, just to get a show of hands, how many people would say yes to that? I got one hand. Come on. One hand. Okay, we got a few. How many would say no? Okay, we got a lot of no's. A more sympathetic audience I could not have. So this is a quote that some of you may be familiar with from Noam Chomsky, and one that I have a particular affinity for. If we don't believe in freedom of expression for people we despise, then we don't believe in it at all. In other words, one of the tenets of a free and open society is that you're allowed to hold and express opinions that other people may find offensive. Unfortunately, that's not how the law works, and it's not how many businesses work either. Even in a free and open society, there are provisions for censorship. And as an organization that does hate speech monitoring, we get some crazy ass emails all the time, mainly Nazis, but we do get concerned citizens who think that there should be no restrictions on speech whatsoever. And so what I'd like to talk about for the next few minutes is whether that's actually realistic or even desirable, and I'd like to encourage a more nuanced understanding of what it means to believe, as I do, in free speech. So the first point I'd like to make to dispel some illusions is that private companies like Facebook and Twitter have no obligation to offer you service. If they don't like what you're saying, if they don't like what you're behaving, how you're behaving, they can quarantine your content and boot you off their platforms, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you don't like it, you can go create your own social network. You're free to do that. Likewise, government has a right, and I would argue a responsibility, to intercede when there's a reasonable risk of violence. And so harm can mean any number of things. It can mean yelling fire in a crowded theater just to see what would happen, which is, some people have probably heard is a great example of when speech can actually be dangerous and when it should be curtailed, or it can mean threatening mass murder online. And so most mass murders may not be preceded by hate speech, but some are. And so it's not surprising that government and law enforcement will look at a history of violence or violent ideation to help perform preventive policing. And so you can say quite legitimately, well, there's a slippery slope there that leads to a Minority Report kind of dystopia, that not every incident of hate speech leads to hate crime. And that is, I believe, the second reference to Minority Report tonight. I'm sure not the last. But the problem with that argument is that it's kind of like saying, of all the, let's say, U.S. citizens who are registered to hold firearms, the vast majority are not terrorists, so therefore, why can't we bring a gun on an airplane? Clearly, there are situations where the many are curtailed for the few. If you think the preceding 2 points are bullshit, then you really want to double down on free speech, then you can also make the argument, well, I should be able to say whatever the hell I want, but bear in mind that you're then practicing censorship. You're then booting other people offline. And I've got 3 great examples here, so we can just keep the diagrams up for a moment. On the left, you've got a chart that shows abuse against journalists at The Guardian based on their gender. If you're at the back of the room and you can't tell which color is which gender, I think you can make an educated guess. On the right, AOC, who left Facebook after a tremendous amount of harassment. And in the middle, victims of Gamergate, much the same situation. So the point I'm trying to make is that we can all agree censorship is bad, free speech is good, but there are a lot of hairpin turns on that particular road to the moral high ground. So how do you solve hate speech without infringing on people's civil liberties? this is our playbook right here at Hatebase. So first and foremost, we're extremely transparent about what we do and how we do it. We have an open methodology, and we encourage people to participate. Secondly, we facilitate independent research. We're currently working with about 300 universities around the world. Oxford, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, pretty much any university you can think of has pulled data. Thirdly, we're big advocates of education and counter-messaging. In a lot of circumstances, it's better to mock hate speech than to remove hate speech, because when you remove hate speech, you're not removing the hate, you're just removing the expression of hatred. And then finally, we work with government agencies for better policy making so that we can triage resources appropriately to impacted populations. So how do we do that? Well, we're a data service that uses natural language processing technology to monitor hate speech. So we work with a whole lot of big and small NGOs. We work with governments at the federal and increasingly at the municipal level. We're working with a lot of big social networks, so lots of public and private entities. And again, our goal is to operate transparently and without partisanship. These are just some of the organizations that we're currently working with and that we're proud to have assisting us in trying to keep the internet still a place of civil discourse, of humanity, of education, of occasional mockery, and ultimately a place that's going to grow and be suitable for everybody to use. That's it. I've packed a whole lot of stuff into 5 minutes, so I happily take any questions anybody has.
Stay up for questions.
Give me those whistles. Where are those whistles? There we go. There we go. Now, easy on the language in these questions, okay? We don't have Hatebase installed on the mics.
Just a quick question about something you said at the beginning of your presentation about like people getting kicked off of platforms. When people get kicked off of platforms and put into like more and more marginalized communities that maybe even have less visibility from the outside, doesn't that cause more hate to fester? And like maybe having, I mean, I don't have an answer. I'll ask you the question.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it puts a tremendous responsibility on social networks that are maintaining conversations to fairly arbitrate what people are saying and how people treat each other on those platforms. And so a lot of what we do with the social networks we work with isn't just provide them data. We do that, but we also provide them advice and help on practicing fair content moderation. That said, if you're getting kicked off of network after network after network for hate speech, I'm having a hard time sympathizing with how marginalized you might feel compared with the people that you might have marginalized to get to that point. So anyways, it's very situational. Thank you.
One more question.
Hi, over here.
Oh.
Over here. Hi.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Candy. I'm a therapist. I'm not a techie. So it was a bit challenging for me to follow a little bit about it, but I think I have one question that maybe summarizes a bit of my confusion. I just want to know, how would you explain the value of your service to kids who are being cyberbullied?
Yeah, that's a great question because it hits me very personally because I have 2 kids in high school, and before I embarked on Hatebase, I thought that a lot of these issues, I thought issues of Nazism were something that happened a long time ago and far away, and you know, sure enough, my daughter was exposed to, for God's sakes, in Toronto, a lot of Nazi symbiology floating around on Instagram. And so I guess what I would say is that a platform like ours is designed to help ecosystems make better decisions about how to moderate that content. And whether you want to do that proactively or reactively, there are pros and cons for both. But I think we need to accept as a society that there's a problem there that we have to do something about. And so what we try and do to contribute is to provide a lexicon data and natural language processing so that ecosystems can make their own decisions about what they think is appropriate on their platforms, especially for kids.
Thank you.